Are they charging money for this? About 2 years ago, I got a hold of something called Metro 2033, and I'll admit, I kind of fell in love with it for a couple of weeks. And it wasn't the rich, atmospheric world it built or the well-paced set pieces that I fell in love with, it was actually the gunplay. Specifically, the gunplay that you got on the Ranger Hardcore difficulty. It would turn off your HUD and balanced out the HP values for both you and your enemies. Everyone died in 1 or 2 shots, and when you combined the HUD-less navigation with the game's healthy stealth system, gunfights would start and stop organically. Every weapon packed a super lethal punch. It made the whole game feel unpredictable and dangerous. It was hard as nails, but it was also fair, so all in all, it was a pretty great ride. But now we have a sequel, and it's one that makes the unfortunate first impression of turning Ranger Hardcore into a microtransaction, which is ridiculous because it seems like something so lightweight that it could pretty easily be modded in. This was actually a holdover decision from THQ, and not the actual game developers. Ranger mode was removed because of a publisher getting involved with the creative process, not because the game designers themselves actually wanted to make the game that way. On the bright side, it seems like they included a cheeky workaround of their own. If you turn the HUD options off and set it to the hardest difficulty, then you have an experience that more or less resembles the Ranger mode I remember from 2 years ago, with the most obvious exception being a crosshair hit indicator. But with that out of the way, I gotta say that one of the biggest reasons why I fell in love with the last game was because of how it defied the typical negativity surrounding modern military shooters. And the sequel does it just as gracefully, mostly because it's almost the same game. Sure, it's a completely linear corridor shooter in a tired post-apocalyptic setting. You do spend most of your time following someone else's backside through a literal tunnel of set pieces, and most of your progression is driven by non-interactive cutscenes that have your guy flailing his arms from one scene to the next. It's got the hit-scan weapons that you just point and click on bad guys with, and of course there's the ever-present regenerating health, but Metro is greater than the sum of its parts. There's a wealth of other mechanics working alongside these that keep its gunplay from turning into the spongy, cover-based stop and pop that stains this genre. Now here's a disclaimer, the rules and mechanics that make Metro unique don't really work on the easier difficulty levels, so for any newcomers to the game I greatly encourage you to ramp up the difficulty. What's interesting is that once you do, the game's still actually kind of easy. It just plays by different rules. For starters, ammo gets increasingly more rare on higher difficulties, and ammo is money. Rifle rounds are the currency of this world, and they're scarce. But of course, that wouldn't mean anything if there wasn't anything to spend money on. You only get rare opportunities to exchange all the ammo you find into the military-grade rifle rounds that you use to buy other weapons, items, and of course, other kinds of ammo that you may need more. But there's just simply not enough ammo in the game to spray and pray your way through the whole thing. You actually have to conserve your shots in order to buy more. It's an invisible scoring mechanic that encourages you to fire your gun as little as possible, which is especially clever because Metro also has pretensions of being a stealth game. In this game, enemies don't magically know where you are at all times, which means that you have room to pick them off conservatively. In almost every encounter you're given the initiative to shoot first, hide, then shoot again, allowing you to save ammo and, by proxy, money. That ammo to money mechanic is also how you stock up on the throwable items, like the throwing knives, which function as a silent one-hit KO, and the claymores, which are useful for these guys that look just like hydralisks. There are also 2 different types of grenades you can buy, but I found that I could go through the whole game pretty easily without either of them. Just like in the last game, the best moments of Last Light are the ones where the game doesn't hold your hand. There are some great outdoor sections where you have to experiment with all these items and tactics while also scavenging for more, and you have to do it under time pressure. The air is polluted with nuclear fallout, and your gas mask works for only a couple of minutes unless you can quickly find more. So you're nervously scrambling around, constantly moving and searching for more supplies while also managing a heavy flow of enemy mobs against the cooldown timers of your own abilities. In fact, describing the process like this makes combat in Metro sound kind of similar to RPG combat, and this is just a testament to how similar good game design is across genres. But of course, Metro is a shooter at its core, so most of the exchange still taxes your twitch shooting skills above everything else. It's a precarious juggling act between 3 core genres that actually balance each other out pretty well. There's not too much on this platter. It's not bloated, but if one of these 3 genres were taken away, then it would break, or at least lessen, the other 2. And despite being so linear, there's enough room in these tunnels for a wealth of different tactics, all the way up to just non-lethally sneaking past everyone. But the stealth is undoubtedly the weakest link in this chain. It's like Thief. Your visibility isn't based so much on line of sight as it is on the brightness of the texture you're standing on. You're given a little light gem on your watch that shows you one of the two binary states of the system. You're either visible or you're not. And when you're not visible, you really are not visible. The sightlines on these guards are ridiculous. They're slow to react and almost blind, so ghosting past them is pretty tempting unless you want to steal their ammo. Compared to the last game, stealth is considerably easier here, and that's a bit of a shame. There were entire chapters of the first game that I wanted to sneak through, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. There was a challenge there. Guards would be alarmed right away. They would fight back with a disproportionate advantage. There were consequences for getting spotted and a real sense of accomplishment for slipping through. It really evoked the gratifying underdog success story that stealth gameplay tells, and there's a lot of that satisfaction missing in the new game. But really, increasing the stealth difficulty is probably the only thing that I would change about this game. For the most part, it does everything I expected and wanted it to, which was pretty much just to deliver more Metro. The graphics have made the logical step up, it's a little tighter and more polished, and it still retains all the good qualities of its predecessor. It's a refreshing reminder that linearity isn't inherently bad by itself. There's enough going on here both mechanically and contextually to make this corridor crawl a little more interesting. It's still a swashbuckling roller coaster ride through one of the most detailed and pessimistic visions of post-apocalyptia yet. We've seen so many other stories of post-nuclear factions fighting underground resource wars, but Metro's foreign lens and sheer attention to detail somehow made this one feel refreshing. It's so Ukrainian, for better or for worse. It's full of weird menus, depressing overtones, a wonky translation, and some really blatant sexism, but it's one of the most lovingly crafted games of its genre. The guys who made these maps made sure that every area has a place where these people eat, sleep, work, and even poop. They've included environmental details that explain the economics and politics of this world, and they've made sure to show us what their entertainment is like and even what their kids are doing. The actual plot of the gameplay gets pretty cringy towards the end, but it's the setting that really tells that story. And that setting has had so much love put into it that it's hard not to be impressed. The only problem with all of this is that that's pretty much everything the last game did too. Since Metro isn't a new IP anymore, the sequel is less of a pleasant surprise. The storyline is a good deal more formulaic, and that's probably because they didn't base the writing on this one off of a novel. The soundtrack plays it safer too, which is a shame since some of the most immersive and terrifying moments of the first game were driven by a melancholy and unconventional score that just isn't in this one. Metro Last Light is a good game, but I don't think that a 10-hour roller coaster ride is worth $60. I definitely recommend picking it up once it hits $45 though, but if you haven't played the first, go ahead and do it. It's one of the most enjoyable games of this generation, and while Last Light is a worthy sequel, it's not noticeably better or worse. It's just a case where more of the same isn't a bad thing.